Most people think that when a baby cries at night, something is wrong, that the crying is a problem to be solved, a malfunction, a glitch in the system. Parents rush in with bottles, pacifiers, lullabies, white noise machines, swaddles, and desperate Google searches at 2 a.m. They treat the crying like a fire alarm, something to be switched off as quickly as possible. But the truth is far more profound and far more beautiful than that. That crying, it isn't a malfunction. It is, in fact, one of the most sophisticated pieces of biological engineering the human brain has ever produced. And understanding why your baby cries at night doesn't just make you a better parent. It fundamentally changes how you understand yourself, your relationships, and the invisible forces that have been shaping your behavior your entire life. Forces that were set in motion the very first time you cried in the dark and waited to see if someone would come. Let's go there. Picture this. It's 1987. A little girl, let's call her Maya, is 3 months old, sleeping in her crib in a small apartment in Ohio. It's 2:14 in the morning. The room is dark. The house is quiet. And then, Maya wakes up. She doesn't know why. She doesn't have the language to explain it. She doesn't even have a fully formed sense of self yet. All she knows, on the most primal, cellular level of her tiny nervous system, is that she is alone. And alone, for a 3-month-old human, is not just uncomfortable. It is, from an evolutionary standpoint, a signal of genuine danger. So she does the only thing she can do. She cries. Now, here's where the story branches into two very different trajectories. In one version, Maya's mother, exhausted as she is, hears the cry, shuffles down the hall, picks Maya up, holds her close, whispers something soft and meaningless into her hair, and stays until the trembling in those tiny shoulders settles. In the other version, Maya's mother, maybe because she's been told to let the baby cry it out, maybe because she's too exhausted to move, maybe just because she's human and overwhelmed, stays in bed and waits for the crying to stop on its own. Both things happen in homes all over the world, every single night. And the difference between those two responses is quietly, invisibly, writing the first chapter of Maya's psychological life. Not in a dramatic, traumatic way, but in the way that water carves stone. Slowly, persistently, shaping the architecture of who she will become. Here's what the neuroscience actually tells us. The human brain at birth is, relative to other mammals, almost comically unfinished. A foal can walk within hours of being born. A baby seal can navigate cold water days after birth. But a human newborn? They can barely hold up their own head. This isn't a design flaw. It's actually a deliberate evolutionary trade-off. Human brains are so large, and the human birth canal is so narrow, that if we waited until our brains were fully developed before being born, we'd never make it out. So instead, we arrive early. Radically, vulnerably, beautifully early. Neuroscientists sometimes call the first 3 months of life the fourth trimester, for exactly this reason. The baby is, in a meaningful sense, still supposed to be in the womb. This means that for the first year of life, and really the first several years, the human baby is almost entirely dependent on another person not just for food and warmth, but for something even more fundamental: nervous system regulation. Let that sink in for a moment. Your baby doesn't just need you to feed them. They need you to help their brain learn how to be calm. They need your regulated nervous system to teach their unregulated one. They need co-regulation before they can achieve self-regulation. And the primary way they communicate this need, the ancient, wired-in, cross-cultural signal that says, "I need you here, I need your nervous system next to mine," is crying. Dr. Alan Shore at UCLA, one of the world's foremost researchers on early brain development, has spent decades studying what he calls right brain to right brain communication between parents and infants. What he found is extraordinary. When a mother holds her distressed baby and soothes them, something happens at the neurological level that goes far beyond comfort. The baby's stress response, their cortisol levels, their heart rate variability, the activation of their amygdala, literally synchronizes with the mother's. The baby borrows the parent's calm. They don't generate calm on their own, They receive it, like a Wi-Fi signal, through proximity and touch and the sound of a familiar voice. This is called neurobiological co-regulation, and it is not a luxury. It is the foundation upon which a baby's entire capacity for emotional self-regulation is built. Brick by brick, night by night, cry by cry. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Because what happens during these nighttime interactions isn't just about the immediate moment. What's happening is something called neural pathway formation. Every time a baby cries and a caregiver responds with warmth and consistency, a specific sequence fires in the baby's developing brain. Neurons connect, pathways strengthen, and over time, through hundreds, then thousands of these repetitions, the brain begins to encode a very specific message into its deepest architecture. That message is this: when I am distressed, help arrives. When I reach out, someone comes. The world is, at its core, a safe and responsive place. Developmental psychologists call this the foundation of secure attachment. And the research on what secure attachment predicts about a person's life is almost staggering in its scope. Securely attached children show greater emotional regulation, higher resilience to stress, better social skills, stronger academic performance, and even, decades later, more stable and satisfying adult romantic relationships. On the flip side, when babies cry and no one comes, not occasionally, which is completely normal and fine, but chronically, consistently, as a pattern, the brain encodes a different message. When I am distressed, I am alone. Reaching out doesn't work. I must find another way to manage this. And the brain, being the adaptive, survival-oriented organ that it is, does find another way. It develops what researchers call insecure attachment strategies, ways of relating to the world that are perfectly rational given the early environment, but that can create real difficulties in adult life. This is the work of John Bowlby, the British psychiatrist who first developed attachment theory in the 1950s, later refined by Mary Ainsworth through her famous strange situation experiments in the 1970s. What they discovered, and what decades of subsequent research has confirmed, is that the emotional blueprint laid down in infancy doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It becomes the operating system running beneath your conscious thoughts and choices, quietly influencing how you respond to conflict, intimacy, loss, and uncertainty for the rest of your life. Think about that the next time you wonder why you respond to stress the way you do. Why you either reach out to others or shut down and go silent. Why closeness sometimes feels suffocating and sometimes feels like the only thing you need. Those patterns have roots. And for many of us, those roots go all the way back to a dark room, a crib, and the question of whether anyone came. But here's the unexpected insight, and this is the part most parenting content completely misses. The crying isn't just about need, it's also about expectation learning. In 2013, neuroscientist Carl Friston published influential work on what he called the predictive processing model of the brain. The core idea is this: the brain is not a passive receiver of information. It is a prediction machine. It is constantly building models of the world, generating predictions about what will happen next, and updating those models based on what actually happens. And this process begins in infancy. When a baby cries in the night, they are not just expressing distress. On a deep neural level, they are running an experiment. They are generating a prediction: will someone come? And waiting to see if reality confirms it. When the prediction is confirmed consistently, the brain refines its model of the world toward safety and responsiveness. When the prediction is violated consistently, when the cry goes unanswered, the brain refines its model in a different direction, toward unpredictability, toward self-reliance, toward hypervigilance or shutdown. This is why the response to crying matters so much. Not because a single sleepless night will scar your child for life, it won't, but because the pattern of responses, accumulated over thousands of interactions, literally teaches the child's brain what kind of world it lives in. Your response to your baby's cry at 2 a.m. is, in the most literal neurological sense, a lesson in cosmology. You are teaching them the fundamental nature of reality. That is both a profound responsibility and, if you let it be, an incredible privilege. Now, what does this actually mean for you as a parent? Because here's where a lot of psychology content loses people. It gives you the science, it gives you the theory, and then it leaves you standing in your kitchen at 3 a.m. with a screaming baby and absolutely no idea what to do. So let's get practical. First, respond but don't panic. There is a crucial difference between responsive parenting and anxious parenting. When you rush to your baby in a state of high stress and panic, your dysregulated nervous system doesn't soothe them. It amplifies their distress. Remember, they are borrowing your emotional state. What they need from you is not speed exactly. It's calm presence. Before you go in, take one breath. Ground yourself. Then go. The goal is to bring regulation, not just physical presence. Second, understand the difference between types of crying. Not all crying is the same, and research by Dr. Dunstan and others has shown that babies actually produce distinct vocalizations for different needs: hunger, tiredness, discomfort, overstimulation, and the need for connection. With practice, most parents begin to distinguish these. The point isn't to become a crying decoder overnight, but to approach nighttime crying with curiosity rather than dread. Become a student of your specific baby. They are, in their way, trying very hard to communicate with you. Third, release the guilt about imperfection. D.W. Winnicott, the British pediatrician and psychoanalyst, coined one of the most liberating phrases in all of developmental psychology: the good enough mother. His insight was that babies don't need perfect caregiving. They don't need instant responses every single time. In fact, Winnicott argued, small, manageable doses of frustration, moments where the cry goes unanswered for a bit before help arrives, are actually important for development. They give the baby the experience of tolerating brief distress and discovering that it passes. What matters is the overall pattern. Are most cries eventually met? Does connection follow distress? Is the world, on balance, responsive? That's what counts. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be enough and present enough of the time. Fourth, take care of your own nervous system. This is the advice that almost no parenting book leads with, but perhaps should. You cannot co-regulate a baby's nervous system if your own nervous system is running on empty. The research is very clear. Parental stress directly affects infant stress responses. A parent who is chronically sleep-deprived, isolated, or overwhelmed is neurobiologically less able to provide the regulated presence their baby needs. This is not a moral failing, it is physiology. Which is why the most important thing you can do for your baby's nighttime well-being is to find ways, however imperfect, however patchwork, to support your own emotional regulation. Ask for help. Take the shift off sometimes. Sleep when you can. Connect with other adults. The airplane oxygen mask metaphor exists for a reason. Fifth, know that this season passes. Developmentally, the intense nighttime crying of infancy is time-limited. As the brain matures, as the prefrontal cortex begins its long, slow process of development, as the baby's own capacity for self-regulation begins to come online, the need for external co-regulation gradually decreases. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen linearly, but it happens. The research consistently shows that children who receive warm, responsive caregiving in infancy don't become clingy, dependent adults. They become the opposite: more secure, more independent, more capable of self-soothing and emotional regulation. The investment you make in showing up at 2 a.m. is, in the most literal neurological sense, building the architecture of your child's future resilience. Let's come back to Maya. She's 35 now. She lives in Seattle, works as a social worker, and has a baby of her own, a 6-week-old named Eli, who wakes up 3 times a night like clockwork. When Eli cries, Maya doesn't always feel serene about it. Some nights, she lies there for a long moment, exhausted, negotiating with herself. But she goes. She picks him up. She breathes, slowly, deliberately. And in the dark of that small room, something ancient and important happens. Her regulated nervous system reaches out to his unregulated one. His cortisol begins to fall. His heart rate slows. The trembling in those tiny shoulders begins to settle. She doesn't know all the neuroscience. She doesn't think about predictive processing or attachment theory while she's standing there at 2 a.m. She's just a tired mother holding her baby in the dark. But what she is doing in those small hours is extraordinary. She is writing the first chapter of who Eli will be. She is teaching his brain what the world is made of. She is building, synapse by synapse, the quiet internal voice that will tell him, decades from now, in some moment of adult uncertainty or loss, that it is safe to reach out, that help exists, that the dark doesn't last. The next time your baby cries at night, I want you to try to hold two things at once. Yes, it's exhausting. Yes, you need sleep. Yes, there are limits to what any human being can give. And also, what is happening in that moment is one of the most neurologically significant interactions of your child's entire life. The relationship being built between your nervous system and theirs is the template from which their entire emotional life will be cut. That's not pressure, it's perspective. Because most of the time, you are already doing it right. You showed up, you're here, you're asking the questions. And in the ancient neurobiological language of the infant brain, that is everything. If this gave you a new way of looking at those sleepless nights, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're curious about the deeper science of attachment and how our earliest experiences shape our adult relationships, stay here because we're just getting started.